I'd like to just say a few words preliminarily, and then the highlight for me will be getting your questions in a few minutes, because I want to talk about what's on your mind. I urge you to throw hard balls. It's more fun for me if you put a little speed on the pitches as they come in. You can ask about anything except last week's Texas A&M game. That's off limits. We have a couple of men here from SunTrust. I was just up at the Coke meeting, and I sit next to Jimmy Williams there, who ran SunTrust for many years, and he wanted to be sure that I wore this SunTrust shirt down here. I've tried to get sponsorship on the senior golf tour. I haven't had much luck, but now on the Bankers tour, I'm doing a little bit better. And he says I get a percentage of the increase in deposits in Gainesville. So I'll go out for SunTrust, dear old SunTrust. I would like to talk for just 1 minute to the students about your future when you leave here, because you're going to learn a tremendous amount about investments, and you'll learn enough to do well. You've all got the IQ to do well. You've all got the initiative and energy to do well, or you wouldn't be here. And most of you will succeed in meeting your aspirations. But in determining whether you succeed, there's more to it than intellect and energy. And I'd like to talk for just a second about that. In fact, there was a fellow that Pete Kiewit in Omaha used to say that he looked for 3 things in hiring people. Look for integrity, intelligence, and energy. And he said if that person didn't have the first 2, that the latter 2 would kill him. Because if they don't have integrity, you want them dumb and lazy. You don't want them smart and energetic. And I really like to talk about that first one, because we know you've got the second 2. And play along with me in a little game for just a second in terms of thinking about that question. You've all been here, I guess almost all of your second-year MBAs, and you've gotten to know your classmates. And think for a moment that I granted you the right to buy 10% of one of your classmates for the rest of his or her lifetime. Now you can't pick one with a rich father. That doesn't count. I mean, you've got to pick somebody who's going to do it on their own merit. And I gave you an hour to think about it. Which one are you going to pick among all your classmates as for the one you want to own 10% of for the rest of their lifetime? Are you going to give them an IQ test? Pick the one with the highest IQ? I doubt it. Are you going to pick the one with the best grades? I doubt it. You're not even going to pick the most energetic one necessarily. You're the one that displays the most initiative. But you're going to start looking for qualitative factors in addition to, because everybody's got enough brain here and enough energy. And I would say that if you thought about it for an hour and decided who you're going to place that bet on, you'd probably pick the one who you responded the best to, because the one that was going to have the leadership qualities, the one that was going to be able to get other people to carry out their interests. And that would be the person who was generous and honest and who gave credit to other people even for their own ideas, all kinds of qualities like that. And you could write down those qualities that you admire in this other person, whoever you admire most in the class. And then I would throw in a hooker. I would say as part of owning 10% of this person, you had to agree to go short 10% of somebody else in the class. That's more fun, isn't it? And you think, well, now who do I want to go short of? And again, you wouldn't pick the person with the lowest IQ you would start thinking about the person really who turned you off for one reason or another. I mean, they had various qualities, quite apart from their academic achievement, but they had various qualities. In the end, you shouldn't really want to be around them, and other people didn't want to be around them. And what were the qualities that lead to that? Well, there'd be a whole bunch of things, but it's the person who's egotistical, the person who's greedy, the person who's slightly dishonest, cuts corners, all of these qualities. And you could write those down on the right-hand side of the page. As you looked at those qualities on the left and right-hand side, there's one interesting thing about them. It's not the ability to throw a football 60 yards. It's not the ability to run the 100-yard dash in 9.3. It's not being the best-looking person in the class. They're all qualities that if you really want to have the ones on the left-hand side, you can have them. I mean, they're qualities of behavior, temperament, character that are achievable. They're not forbidden to anybody in this group. And if you look at the qualities on the right-hand side, the ones that you find turn you off in other people, there's not a quality there that you have to have. If you have it, you can get rid of it, and you can get rid of it a lot easier at your age than you can at my age, because most behavior is habitual, and They say the chains of habit are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken. And there's no question about it. I see people with these self-destructive behavior patterns at my age or even 10 or 20 years younger, and they really are entrapped by them. They go around and they do things that turn off other people right and left. And they don't need to be that way, but by a certain point they get so they can hardly change it. But at your age, you can have any habits, any patterns of behavior that you wish. It's simply a question of which you decide, and why not decide the ones that, I mean, if you like, Ben Graham did this, and Ben Franklin did it before him, but Ben Graham in his low teens looked around and he looked at the people he admired, and he said, you know, I want to be admired, so why don't I just behave like them? And he found there was nothing impossible about behaving like them. And similarly, he did the same thing on the reverse side in terms of getting rid of those qualities. So I would suggest that if you write those qualities down and think about them a little while and make them habitual, you will be the one that you want to buy 10% of when you get all through. And the beauty of it is you already own 100% and you're stuck with it. So you might as well be that person as somebody else. Well, that's a short little sermon. So let's get on to what you're interested in. And like I say, you can go all over the lot. So I don't know exactly how we're going to handle this, but let's start with a hand here someplace or other. Where do we go with the first one? Yeah, right here.
Your thoughts about Japan.
My thoughts about Japan? I'm not a macro guy. Now I say to myself, Berkshire Hathaway can borrow money for 10 years at 1% in Japan now. 1%. And I say to myself, gee, I took Graham's class 45 years ago, and I've been working hard at this thing all my life. Maybe I can earn more than 1%, you know, if I really work hard at it. 1% annually. It doesn't seem impossible, does it? So I wouldn't want to get involved in currency risk, so I'd have to do it in something that was yen denominated. So I have to be in Japanese real estate or a Japanese business or something of the sort, and all I have to do is beat 1%. That's all the money's going to cost me, and I can get it for 10 years. So far, I haven't found anything. It's kind of interesting. The Japanese companies earn very low returns on equity, and they have a bunch of businesses that earn 4, 5, 6% on equity, and it's very hard to earn a lot as an investor when the business you're in doesn't earn very much money. Now some people do it. In fact, I've got a friend, Walter Schloss, who worked with Graham at the same time I did, and it was the first way I went at stocks, to buy stocks selling way below working capital, very cheap quantitative stocks. I call it the cigar butt approach to investing. Is that you walk down the street and you look around for a cigar butt someplace, and you see one, and it's soggy and kind of repulsive, but there's one puff left in it. So you pick it up, and the puff is free. I mean, it's a cigar butt stock. I mean, you get one free puff out of it, and then you throw it away and you walk down the street and try and find another one. I mean, it's not elegant, but it works. You know, if you're looking for a free puff, it works. Those are low return businesses. But time is the friend of the wonderful business. It's the enemy of the lousy business. If you're in a lousy business for a long time, you're going to get a lousy result, even if you buy it cheap. If you're in a wonderful business for a long time, even if you pay a little too much going in, you're going to get a wonderful result if you stay in a long time. I find very few wonderful businesses in Japan at present now. They may change the culture in some way so that managements get more stockholder responsive over there and returns are higher. But at the present time, you'll find a very lot of low return businesses, and that was true even when the Japanese economy was booming. I mean, it's amazing. They had an incredible market without incredible companies. They were incredible in terms of doing a lot of business, but they weren't incredible in terms of the return on equity that they achieved. And that finally caught up with them. So we have so far done nothing there, but as long as money's 1%, I'll keep looking. I mean, yeah.
You were rumored to be one of the rescue buyers of long-term capital. What was the play there? What did you see?
Well, there's a story in the current Fortune magazine, one has Rupert Murdoch's picture on the cover, that tells the whole story of our involvement. It's kind of an interesting story because it's a long story, so I won't go into all the background of it, but I got the really serious call about long-term capital about 4 weeks ago this Friday, whenever it was my granddaughter. I got it in mid-afternoon, and my granddaughter was having her birthday party that evening, and then I was flying that night to Seattle to go on a 12-day trip with Gates to Alaska in a private train, all kinds of things where I was really out of communication. But I got this call on a Friday afternoon saying that things were really getting serious there. I'd had some other calls before that the article gets into a few weeks earlier. I know those people most of them pretty well. So a lot of them were Solomon when I was there. And the place was imploding. And the Fed was sending people up that weekend. And so between that Friday and the following Wednesday, when the New York Fed, in effect, orchestrated a rescue effort, but without any federal money involved, I was quite active, but I was having this terrible time because we were sailing up through these canyons, which held no interest for me whatsoever, in Alaska. And the captain would say, you know, if we just steer over here, we might see some bears and whales. And I said, steer where you get a good satellite connection, because I want home. But we put in a bid on Wednesday morning. By then I was in Bozeman, Montana, and I talked to Bill McDonough, the head of the New York Fed, about 10 o'clock. They were having a meeting of the bankers at 10 o'clock that morning in New York, and I caught him. Right, we actually delivered a message to him. He called me out there in Wyoming a little bit before 10 New York time, and we made a bid. It was because it was being done at a long distance and everything. It was really the outline of a bid, but in the end, it was a bid for $250 million, essentially for the net assets of. But we would have put in $3.75 billion on top of that, and it would have been $3 billion from Berkshire Hathaway, $700 million from AIG, and $300 million from Goldman Sachs, and we submitted that, but we put a very short time fuse on it, because when you're bidding on $100 billion worth of securities that are moving around, you don't want to leave a fixed price bid out there very long, plus we were worried about it getting shopped. In the end, the bankers made the deal, and but it was an interesting period. The whole long-term capital management, and I hope most of you are familiar with it, but the whole story is really fascinating, because if you take John Meriwether and Eric Rosenfeld, Larry Hillenbrand, Greg Hawkins, Victor Agani, the two Nobel Prize winners, Merton and Scholes, if you take the 16 of them, they probably have as high an average IQ as any 16 people working together in one business in the country, including at Microsoft or wherever you want to name. So there's an incredible amount of intellect in that room. Now you combine that with the fact that those 16 had extensive experience in the field they were operating. I mean, this was not a bunch of guys who had made their money, you know, selling men's clothing and then all of a sudden went into the securities business or anything. They'd had in aggregate, the 16 had probably had 350 or 400 years of experience doing exactly what they were doing. And then you throw in the third factor, that most of them had virtually all of their very substantial net worths in the business. So they had their own money up, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of their own money up, super high intellect, working in a field they knew, and essentially they went broke. And that to me is absolutely fascinating. I mean, if I ever write a book, it's going to be called Why Smart People Do Dumb Things. My partner says it should be autobiographical, but this might be an interesting illustration. And these are perfectly decent guys. I respect them, and they helped me out when I had problems at Solomon, and so they're not bad people at all. But to make money they didn't have and didn't need, they risked what they did have and did need. And that's foolish. That is just plain foolish. It doesn't make any difference what your IQ is. If you risk something that is important to you for something that is unimportant to you, it just does not make any sense. I don't care whether the odds are 100 to 1 that you succeed or 1,000 to 1 that you succeed. If you hand me a gun with 1,000 chambers, 1,000,000 chambers in it, and there's a bullet in one chamber, and you said, put it up your temple, how much do you want to be paid to pull it once? I'm not going to pull it. You know, you can name any sum you want, but it doesn't do anything for me on the upside, and I think the downside's fairly clear. So I'm not interested in that kind of a game, and yet people do it financially and without thinking about it very much. There was a great book. It wasn't a great book. It was a great title. It was a lousy book written once with a great title by Walter Gutman. The title was You Only Have to Get Rich Once. Now, that seems pretty fundamental, doesn't it? What difference if you've got $100 million at the start of the year, and you're going to make 10% if you're unleveraged and 20% if you're leveraged 99 times out of 100? What difference does it make at the end of the year whether you've got 110 million or 120 million? It makes no difference at all. I mean, if you die at the end of the year, you know, the guy that writes up the story may make a typo, and he may say 110 even if he had 120, so you've got nothing at all. You know, it makes absolutely no difference. It makes no difference to your family. It makes no difference to anything. And yet the downside, particularly managing other people's money, is not only losing all your money, but it's disgrace and humiliation and facing friends whose money you've lost and everything. I just can't imagine an equation that makes sense for. And yet 16 guys with very high IQs who are very decent people entered into that game. And, you know, I think it's madness. And it's produced by an over-reliance, to some extent, on things. You know, those guys would tell me back when I was at Solomon, you know, that a 6 Sigma event wouldn't touch us, or a 7 Sigma event. But they were wrong. I mean, their history does not tell you the probabilities of future financial things happening. And they had a great reliance on mathematics, and they felt that the beta of the stock told you something about the risk of a stock. It doesn't tell you a damn thing about the risk of a stock, in my view. And Sigmas do not tell you about the risk of going broke, in my view, and maybe in their view now too. But I don't like to even use them as an example, because they are. I mean, the same thing in a different way could happen to any of us, probably, where we really have a blind spot about something that's crucial because we know a whole lot about something else. It's like Henry Kaufman said the other day. He said the people that are going broke in this situation are just of two types: the ones who knew nothing and the ones that knew everything. And it's sad in a way. I urge you, in anything. We never basically borrow money. I mean, we get float through our insurance business and to do things. But I never borrowed money. I never borrowed money when I had $10,000 basically, because what difference did it make? I was having fun as I went along, and it didn't make any difference whether I had $10,000 or $1 million or $10 million. You know, except if I had a medical emergency or something had come along like that. But I was going to do the same things when I had a lot of money as when I had very little money. You know, if you think about the difference between me and you in terms of how we live, you know, we wear the same clothes basically. SunTrust gives me mine, but you. So we wear the same clothes. We eat. You know, we all have a chance to drink the juice of the gods here. But we all go to McDonald's, or better yet, Dairy Queen, and we live in a house that's warm in winter and cool in summer, and we watch Nebraska, Texas A&M on a big screen. You see it the same way I see it. We do everything. Our lives aren't that different. You know, you'll get decent medical care if something happens to you, and I'll get decent medical care. The only thing we do is we travel differently. You know, I ride around this little plane, and I love it. And that takes money. But if you leave that aside, we travel differently. But other than travel, you know, I think about it. Think, what can I do that you can't do? Now, I get to work in a job that I love, but I've always worked in a job I love. I loved it I loved it just as much when it was a big deal if I made $1,000. And I urge you to work in jobs you love. I mean, I think you're out of your mind if you keep taking jobs that you don't like because you think it'll look good on your resume. I was with a fellow at Harvard the other day who was taking me over to talk, and he was 28, and he was telling me what he'd done in life, which was terrific. And then I said, "What are you going to do next?" And he said, "Well," he said, "after I get out my MBA," he said, "I think maybe I ought to go to work for a management consulting firm because it'll look good on my resume." And I said, "Wait a second, you've been 28, you've been doing all these things. I mean, you've got a resume that's 10 times as good as anybody I've ever seen it already." I said, "If you take another job you don't like, I said, isn't that a little like saving up sex for your old age? You know, I mean, there comes a time when you ought to just start doing what, you know." So, I think I got the point across to him. But you ought to take a job. When you get out here, take a job you love. Don't take a job that you think is going to look good on your resume. Take a job you love. You may change it later on, but you'll jump out of bed in the morning. I mean, when I got out of Columbia, the first thing I tried to go to work for Graham immediately. I offered to go to work for him for nothing. He said I was overpriced, but I kept pestering him. I went out to Omaha and I sold securities for 3 years, and I kept writing him and giving him ideas and doing all these things. Finally, I went to work for him for a couple of years, and it was a great experience. But I always really worked in a job. I worked in a job that I loved doing. And you should really take a job that if you were independently wealthy, you would take. That's the job to take, because that's the one that you're going to have great fun in. You'll learn something. You'll be excited about it, and you can't miss. You may go do something else later on, but you'll get way more out of it. And I don't care what the starting salary is or anything of the sort. I don't know how I got off on that, but there I am. So I do think that if you think you're going to be a lot happier if you've got 2x instead of x, you're probably making a mistake. I mean, you ought to find something you like that works with that, and you'll get in trouble if you think that making 10x or 20x is the answer to everything in life, because then you will do things like borrow money when you shouldn't, or maybe cut corners on things that your employer wants you to cut corners on. Or it just doesn't make any sense. You won't like it when you look back on it. Yeah.
Would you talk to the students about the companies that you like? I don't mean names. I mean what makes the company something that you like.
I like businesses I can understand. We'll start with that. That narrows it down about 90%. And, I mean, there are all kinds of things I don't understand, but fortunately, there's enough I do understand. And you got this big, wide world out there. Almost every company is publicly owned, so you got all American business practically available to you. Now, to start with, it doesn't make sense to go with things that you think you can understand, but you can understand some things. I can understand this. I mean, you can understand this. Anybody can understand this. I mean, this is a product that basically hasn't been changed much. They've added the cherry, but since 1886 or whatever it was, and it's a simple business. It's not an easy business. I don't want a business that's easy for competitors. So I want a business with a moat around it. I want a very valuable castle in the middle, and then I want the duke who's in charge of that castle to be honest and hardworking and able. And then I want a big moat around the castle, and that moat can be various things. The moat in a business like our auto insurance business at GEICO is low cost. I mean, people have to buy auto insurance, so everybody's going to have one auto insurance policy per car, basically, or per driver. And I can't sell them 20, but they have to buy one. What are they going to buy it on? They're going to buy it based on service and cost. Most people will assume the service is fairly identical among companies or close enough, so they're going to do it on cost. So I got to be the low-cost producer. That's my moat. To the extent my costs get further lower than the other guy, I've thrown a couple of sharks into the moat. But all the time, if you've got a wonderful castle, there are people out there who are going to try and attack it and take it away from you. And I want a castle that I can understand, but I want a castle with a moat around it. 30 years ago, Eastman Kodak's moat was just as wide as Coca-Cola's moat. I mean, if you were going to take a picture of your 6-month-old baby, and you're going to want to look at that picture 20 years from now, and you're going to look at it 50 years from now, and you're never going to get a chance. I mean, you're not a professional photographer so that you can evaluate what's going to look good 20 or 50 years ago. What is in your mind about that photography company is what counts, because they are promising you that the picture you take today is going to be terrific to look at 20 or 30 or 50 years from now about something that's very important to you, maybe your own child or whatever it may be. Well, Kodak had that in spades 30 years ago. They owned that. They had what I call share of mind. Forget about share of market, share of mind. They had something in everybody's mind around the country, around the world, with a little yellow box and everything, that said Kodak is the best. That's priceless. They've lost some of that. They haven't lost it all, and not due to George Fisher, who runs it. George is doing a great job. But they let that moat narrow. They let Fuji come and start narrowing the moat in various ways. They let them get into the Olympics and take away that special aspect that only Kodak was fit to photograph the Olympics. So Fuji gets there, and immediately in people's minds, Fuji becomes more and a parody with Kodak. You haven't seen that with Coke. Coke's moat is wider now than it was 30 years ago. You can't see the moat day by day, but every time the infrastructure gets built in some country that isn't yet profitable for Coke but will be 20 years from now, the moat is widening a little bit. Things are all the time changing that moat in one direction or another. 10 years from now, you can see the difference. Our managers of the businesses we run, I've got one message to them, which is to widen the moat. And we want to throw crocodiles and sharks and everything else, gators, I guess, into the moat to keep away competitors. And that comes about through service. It comes about through quality of product. It comes about through cost. It comes about sometimes through patents. It comes about through real estate location. So that's the business I'm looking for. Now, what kind of businesses am I going to find like that? Well, I'm going to find them in simple products, because I'm not going to be able to figure out what the moat's going to look like for Oracle or Lotus or Microsoft 10 years from now. I mean, Gates is the best businessman I've ever run into, and they've got a hell of a position, but I really don't know what that business is going to look like 10 years from now. And I certainly don't know what his competitors' businesses are going to look like 10 years from now. Now, I'll name one I don't own. I know what the chewing gum business is going to look like from 10 years from now. I mean, the internet is not going to change how we chew gum. And nothing much else is going to change how we chew gum. And then are there going to be lots of new products? Is it really our spearmint and juicy fruit and all those going to evaporate. So it isn't going to happen. You give me $1 billion and tell me to go in the chewing gum business and try and make a real dent in Wrigley's, I can't do it. And that's the way I think about business. I say to myself, give me $1 billion and how much can I hurt the guy? Give me $10 billion. Give me $10 billion and how much can I hurt Coca-Cola around the world? I can't do it. Well, those are good businesses. Now give me some money and tell me to hurt somebody in some other fields and I can figure out how to do it. So I want a simple business, easy to understand, great economics now, honest and able management, and then I can see about, in a general way, where they're going to be 10 years from now. And if I can't see where they're going to be 10 years from now, I don't want to buy it. Basically, I don't want to buy any stock where if they close the New York Stock Exchange tomorrow for 5 years, I won't be happy owning it. I buy a farm, and I don't get a quote on it for 5 years, and I'm happy if the farm does okay. I buy an apartment house, don't get a quote on it for 5 years, I'm happy if the apartment house produces the returns that I expect. But people buy a stock, and they look at the price the next morning, and they decide whether they're doing well or not doing well. It's crazy, because they're buying a piece of a business. That's what Graham, the most fundamental part of what he taught me. You're not buying a stock, you're buying a part ownership in a business. You will do well if the business does well, and if you didn't pay a totally silly price. And that's what it's all about. And you ought to buy businesses you understand. Just like if you're buying farms, you ought to buy farms you understand. It's not complicated. Incidentally, in calling this Graham Buffett, I mean, it's just pure Graham. I was very fortunate because I picked up a book when I was 19. I got interested in stocks when I was about 6 or 7, and I bought my first stock when I was 11, but I was playing around with all this stuff. I had charts and volume, and I'm making all kinds of technical calculations and everything. And then I picked up a little book, and it just said that you're not buying some little ticker symbol that bounces around every day. You're buying a part of a business. And as soon as I started thinking about it that way, everything else followed. Very simple. So we buy businesses we think we can understand. There's no one here that can't understand the Coca-Cola company. I would say there's no one here that can understand some new internet company. And I said at the annual meeting this year that if I were teaching a class in business school on the final exam, I would pass out the information on an internet company and ask each student to value it. And anybody that gave me an answer, I'd flunk. I don't know how to do it. But people do it every day. I mean, it's more exciting. I mean, if you look at it like going to the races or something, that's a different thing. But if you're investing, I mean, investing is putting out money to be sure of getting more money back later, at an appropriate rate. And to do that, you have to understand what you're doing it in. I mean, you have to understand the business. And you can understand some businesses, but not all businesses. Yep.
Warren, so you covered half of it, which is trying to understand a business and buying a business, but you also alluded to getting a return on the amount of capital you invest in the business as an investor. And that comes back to what are you paying for the business. How do you determine what you think is a fair price to pay for the business?
It's a tough thing to decide, but I don't want to buy into any business I'm not terribly sure of. So if I'm terribly sure of it, it probably isn't going to offer incredible returns. I mean, why should something that is essentially a cinch to do well offer you 40% a year or something like that? So we don't have huge returns in mind, but we do have in mind never losing anything. And I mean, we bought See's Candy in 1972. See's Candy was then selling 16 million pounds of candy at $1.95 a pound, and it was making 2 bits a pound or $4 million pre-tax. We paid $25 million for it. Took no capital to speak of. When we looked at that business, basically my partner Charlie and I really decided whether there was a little untapped pricing power there. In other words, whether that $1.95 box of candy could just as easily sell for $2 or $2.25. If it could sell for $2.25, another 30 cents a pound was $4.8 million on 16 million pounds, which on a 25 million purchase price was fine. We didn't do any, we've never hired a consultant in our lives. Our idea of consulting is go out and buy a box of candy, and eat it. But what we did know was that they had share of mind in California. I mean, there was something special. Every person in California had something in their mind about See's Candy, and overwhelmingly was favorable. They had taken a box, Valentine's Day and given it to some girl, and she'd kissed him. If she'd slapped him, we'd have no business. But as long as she kisses him, that's what we want in their minds. See's Candy getting kissed. And if we can get that in the minds of people, we can raise prices. And I bought that in I bought it in 1972. We've raised every year. I raise the price on December 26th. I raise it the day after Christmas, so that everybody, because we sell a lot at Christmas. In fact, we'll make $60 million this year. We'll sell 30 million pounds, make $2 a pound. Same business, same formulas, same everything. $60 million still doesn't take any capital, and we'll make more money 10 years from now. But of that 60 million, we make about 55 million in the 3 weeks before Christmas. And our company song is "What a Friend We Have in Jesus." I mean, it is, it is a good business. But the important thing about that business is, think about it a little. Most people don't buy boxed chocolates to consume themselves. They buy them as gifts. You know, somebody's birthday. More likely, it's a holiday. Valentine's Day is the single biggest day of the year. Christmas is the biggest season by far. But women buy for Christmas, and they plan ahead and buy over a 2 or 3 week period. Men buy on Valentine's Day. They're driving home. We run ads on the radio. You know, guilt, 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 guilt. You know, the guys are veering off the freeway right and left. And they won't dare go home without a box of candy when we get through with them on our radio ads. So that Valentine's Day is the biggest day. But can you imagine going home on Valentine's Day, and our See's candy is now $11 a pound, thanks to my brilliance. And and let's say there's candy available at $6 a pound. But do you really want to walk in on Valentine's Day and hand, I mean, your wife's got all these favorable images of the See's candy over the years, and she sees you, and that's the way she thinks of you during the rest of the year when you really behave kind of badly. And you walk in and say, "Honey, this year I took the low bid," and then hand her a box of candy. I mean, it just isn't going to work. So, in a sense, there's untapped price. It's not price dependent, basically. Think of Disney. I mean, Disney is selling, we'll say, home videos for, I don't know what, $16.95, $18.95, or whatever. All over the world, people, and we'll say particularly mothers in this case, have something in their mind about Disney. I mean, every person in this room, when you say Disney, has something in their mind about it. If I say Universal Pictures, you don't have anything in your mind. You know, if I say 20th Century Fox, you don't have anything special in your mind. If I say Disney, you've got something in your mind. And that's true around the world. Now, picture yourself with a couple of young kids, you know, who you want to put away for a couple of hours every day so you get a little peace of mind. And you know, if you get them one video, they'll watch it 20 times. So you go to the video store or wherever you buy the video. Are you going to sit there and premiere, you know, 10 different videos and watch them each for an hour and a half to decide which one your kid should watch? No. I mean, let's say there's one there for $16.95 and the Disney's there for $17.95. You know, if you take the Disney video, you're going to be okay. So you buy it. And you don't have to make a quality decision on something that you don't want to spend the time to do. And so you can get a little bit more money if you're Disney, and you'll sell a lot more videos. It makes it a wonderful business. Makes it very tough for the other guy. How would you try to create a brand? DreamWorks is trying, but how would you try to create a brand that competes with Disney around the world and to replace the concept that people have in their minds about Disney with something that says Universal Pictures? You know, so that the mother's going to walk in and pick out a Universal Pictures video in preference to a Disney. It's not going to happen. You know, Coca-Cola is associated with people being happy around the world. We're every place they're happy. We're at Disney World or Disneyland. We're at the World Cup. We'll be at the Olympics. We're every place where people are happy. Happiness and Coke go together. Now, you give me, I don't care how much money, and tell me that I'm going to do that with RC Cola around the world and have 5 billion people that have a favorable image in their mind about RC Cola. It can't get done. You know, and you can fool around with you can do anything you want to do. You know, have price discounts on weekends and everything, but you're not going to touch it. And that's what you want to have in a business. That's the moat. And you want that moat to widen. And if you're See's Candy, you want to do everything in the world to make sure that the experience, basically, of giving that gift leads to a favorable reaction. That means what's in the box. It means the person that sells it to you, because all our business is done when we're terribly busy. I mean, people come in those weeks before Christmas or on Valentine's Day, and there are long lines. So at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, some woman is selling the last person the last box of candy, and that person's been waiting in line for maybe 20 or 30 customers. And if the salesperson smiles at that last customer, our moat is widened. And if she snarls at him, our moat is narrowed. We can't see it. It's going on every day. But that's the key to it. I mean, it's a total part of the product delivery is having everything associated with it, say, See's Candy, and something pleasant happening. And that's what business is all about. Yep.
When purchasing a company, how much qualitative analysis do you do versus quantitative analysis? And have you ever bought a company where the numbers told you not to?
Those are the best buys. The question is whether have I ever bought a company where the numbers told me not to, and how much is qualitative and how much is quantitative. The best buys have been when the numbers almost tell you not to. I mean, because then you feel so strongly about the product, and not just the fact that you're getting a used cigar butt cheap, that it's compelling. I mean, I owned a windmill company at one time, so windmills are cigar butts, believe me. I bought it very cheap. I bought it at a third of working capital, and we made money out of it. but there's no repetitive money to be earned. I mean, there's a one-time profit in something like that, and it's just not, it's not the thing to be doing. I went through that phase. I mean, I bought streetcar companies and all kinds of things. But in terms of the qualitative, I probably understand the qualitative the moment I get the phone call. I mean, almost every business we've bought has taken 5 or 10 minutes, I mean, in terms of analysis. And we bought 2 businesses this year. General Re is, 18 billion or some deal. I've never been to their home office. I hope it's there. There could be just a few guys, and they say, "Well, what numbers shall we send Buffett this month?" I can see him, coming in once a month, and say, "Well, we'll just tell him we've got 20 billion in the bank this month instead of 18 billion or something." But I've never been there. And before I bought Executive Jet, which is fractional ownership of jets. And before I bought it, I'd never been there. I bought my family a quarter interest in the program 3 years earlier, and I'd seen the service and seen it develop well. And I got the numbers, but if you don't know enough to know about the business instantly, you won't know enough in a month or 2 months. I mean, you have to have sort of the background of understanding and knowing what you do understand and don't understand. And that is the key. It's defining what I call your circle of competence. And everybody's got a different circle of competence. The important thing is not how big the circle is. The important thing is staying inside the circle. And if that circle has only got 30 companies in it out of thousands on the big board, as long as you know which 30 they are, you're okay. And you should know those businesses well enough so that you don't need to do lots of work. Now, I did a lot of work in the earlier years just in getting familiar with businesses. And the way I would do that is I would go out and use what Phil Fisher called the scuttlebutt approach. I'd go out, I'd talk to customers, I'd talk to maybe ex-employees in some cases, I'd talk to suppliers, everybody. Every time I'd see somebody in an industry, let's say I was interested in the coal industry, I'd go around and see every coal company, and I'd ask every CEO, if you could only buy stock in one coal company that wasn't your own, which one would it be and why? And you piece those things together, and you learn a lot about the business after a while. And the funny thing is you get very similar answers as long as you ask about competitors. I'd say if you got a silver bullet, and you put it through the head of one competitor, which competitor and why? You'll find out who the best guy in the industry is in that case, or the one that's coming up. And there's a lot of things you can learn about a business. I've done that in the past on the businesses that I feel I could understand, so I don't have to do much of that anymore. It's a nice thing about investing is you don't have to learn anything very new. I mean, you can do it if you want to, but if you learned about Wrigley's chewing gum 40 years ago, you still understand Wrigley's chewing gum. There's not a lot of great insights to get or anything of the sort as you go along. So you do get a database in your head. I had a guy, Frank Rooney, who ran Melville for many years. His father-in-law died, owned a company called H.H. Brown, a shoe company. And he put it up with Goldman Sachs, but he was playing golf with a friend of mine here in Florida and mentioned to this friend. The guy said, "Why don't you call Warren?" He called me at the end of the golf match, and in 5 minutes I basically had a deal. But I knew Frank, and I knew the kind of business. I sort of knew the basic economics of a shoe business, and so I could buy it. And quantitatively, I got to decide what the price is. But that's either yes or no. I mean, I don't fool around a lot with negotiations. So if they name a price that makes sense to me, I buy it. And if they don't, I was happy the day before, so I'll be happy the day after without owning it. Yeah.
Drop in expectations in terms of future earnings and fourth quarter earnings. And in light of the fact that Coke has a lot of their profits coming in from outside the United States, how do you think the Asian crisis, so to speak, is going to affect Coke, and for that matter, the U.S. economy in general?
The question is about the Asian crisis and how it affects a company like Coke that recently announced that the earnings, actually they just announced their third quarter earnings, but a few weeks ago they tipped people off that they were going to be lower in the fourth quarter and so on. Well, basically I love it, but because the market for Coca-Cola products is going to grow far faster over the next 20 years internationally than it will in the United States. It'll grow in the United States on a per capita basis, but it's going to grow faster elsewhere. So the fact that it's going to be a tough period for, who knows, 3 months or 3 years, but it won't be tough for 20 years. I mean, people are still going to, they're going to work productively around the world, and they're going to find that this is a bargain product in terms of the portion of their working day that they have to give up in order to have one of these, or better yet, 5 of them a day, like I do. It's this is a product. In 1936, when I first bought 6 of those for a quarter and sold them for a nickel each, and it was in a 6.5-ounce bottle, and you paid a 2-cent deposit on the bottle. That was a 6.5-ounce bottle for a nickel at that time. It's now a 12-ounce can, which if you buy it on weekends, or if you buy it in bigger quantities, so much money doesn't go to the packaging, I mean, you essentially can buy the 12 ounces for not much more than 20 cents. So you're paying not much more than twice the per ounce price of 1936. It is a product that's gotten cheaper and cheaper and cheaper in relative to people's earning power over the years, and which people love. In 200 countries, you have the per capita use going up every year for a product that's over 100 years old, and that dominates the market. I mean, it's unbelievable. One thing that people don't understand is one of the things that makes this product, this is worth tens and tens of billions of dollars, is one simple fact about really all colas, but we'll call it Coca-Cola for the moment. It happens to be a name I like. Cola has no taste memory. You can drink one of these at 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 o'clock. The one at 5 o'clock will taste just as good to you as the one you drank early in the morning. You can't do that with cream soda, root beer, orange, grape, you name it. All of those things accumulate on you. Most foods and beverages accumulate on you. You get sick of them after a while. And if you eat, I mean, we get these people who go to work for us that seize candy, and we tell them they eat all the candy they want. And the first day they go crazy. But after a week, they're eating about the same amount they'd eat if they were buying it, because chocolate accumulates on, everything accumulates on. There is no taste memory to cola. And that means that you get people around the world that are heavy users that'll drink 5 a day, or Diet Coke, maybe 7 or 8 a day or something of the sort. They'll never do that with other products. So you get this incredible per capita consumption. The average person in this part of the world, well, maybe a little north of here, drinks about 64 ounces of liquid a day. And you can have all 64 ounces of that be Coke, and you will not get fed up with Coke if you like it to start with, in the least. But if you do that with almost anything else, if you eat just one product all day, you'll get a little sick of it after a while. And it's a huge factor. So that today, over 1 billion 8-ounce servings of Coca-Cola products will be sold in the world. And that will grow year by year. It'll grow in every country, virtually. And it'll grow on a per capita basis. And 20 years from now, it'll have grown a lot faster internationally than in the U.S. So I really like that market better, because there is more growth there over time. But it will hurt them it is hurting them in the short term right now. But that doesn't mean anything. I mean, Coca-Cola went public in, I think it was 1919. Stock sold for $40 a share. It went back before that as the Candler family, and they went back. They bought it for $2,000, the whole business. The Candler back in the late 1880s in a couple of purchases. So now he goes public in 1919, $40 a share. 1 year later, it's selling for $19, gone down 50% in 1 year. Now you might think that's some kind of disaster, and you might think that sugar prices increased and the bottlers were rebellious and a whole bunch of things. You could always find a few reasons why that wasn't the ideal moment to buy it. Years later, you'd have seen the Great Depression, then you'd have seen World War II, and you'd seen sugar rationing, and you'd seen thermonuclear weapons, and the whole thing. There's always a reason. But in the end, if you'd bought one share for $40 and reinvested the dividends, it'd be worth about $5 million now. And that factor so overrides anything else. I mean, if you're right about the business, you'll make a lot of money. And the timing part of it is a very tricky thing. So I don't worry about any given event if I've got a wonderful business, what it does to next year or something of the sort. Their price controls have been in this country at various times, and that's fouled up even the best of businesses. I mean, I wouldn't be able to raise the price on December 26th of See's Candy if we had price controls, and we've had them in this country. But that doesn't make it a lousy business if that happens to happen, because you're not going to have price controls forever. We had them in the early 70s. So the wonderful business,